Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Maybe Next Year, the podcast that will not recap Disney on Ice for you, despite 2/3 of the hosts having been recently. My name is Frank.
Scott.
I'm Paul, still remembering my Sesame Street on Ice trip, which was about 35 years ago, but I do remember Cookie Monster being totally awesome.
I feel like I went to a Sesame Street live thing, but it wasn't on ice. But I don't have a strong memory of it. But I do have a strong memory of Disney on Ice, which we won't share here. Patreons and members who listen to the pre-show, of course, Scott and I's review. But we should. You know what? I'm just seeing Scott's note, and why don't we start there, Scott? That's a great idea. Today's podcast is going to be about the Bills' year in review, because this is a Buffalo Bills podcast, and we will discuss some of our Bills feature talk. But let's talk about, briefly at least, the Super Bowl. The New England Patriots won it. The other team lost it. Was it the Rams? It was the Rams, right?
It was the Rams. I mean, remember
they dressed as the Rams, right? Because if I remember, like, they didn't play at all like the Rams, but they dressed like the Rams. I believe it was like 13-3. Is that right?
13-6.
13-6. Oh, right. The other field goal.
No, did they miss that field goal?
No, but they got one at the end.
Did they?
Yeah, I think they got one with
the Patriots missed a field goal.
No, but I remember Scott and Frank had wisely abandoned the game at this point to return home. But I think it was like 13-3, and the Rams got into field goal position. This is very easily verifiable on a fact check.
I'm not
13-3.
Did they put the score of the Super Bowl online? Is that something that's there?
It is. There it is. It was 13-3, because remember, they missed the field goal because their goal is to make that field goal to get within 7, then get the onside kick, then throw a bomb. But they missed it, so it was moot, or as my friend Justin
the Super Bowl. That's drastic, and they should have done that at the beginning of the game, given the way they played. No, it was a look, by all, I remember it was like Trey Wingo or somebody, like I heard a clip of him like defending the Super Bowl as well played, and we were all plebes who didn't get it because we just didn't appreciate a defensive Super Bowl. No, it was fucking hot garbage. That was a terrible Super Bowl top to bottom, and it was not fun. And now, of course, also, like, the Patriots winning doesn't help. It's
if the Rams had won that game, it would have by the same score. I would have felt better about it the next day,
right?
But I wouldn't have enjoyed watching it. I just would have been on edge the whole time, being like, "Oh, it's just about like it doesn't matter what their score is. If the Rams have a 6-point lead, that's essentially meaningless until there's 1 minute left on the clock or 30 seconds, whatever." Because I would have just been terrified the whole time.
Yeah. I hated every minute of it. I mean, I very much enjoyed the company, which was good to see you guys.
It was nice to see everybody and the kids running around. The commercials were also not particularly entertaining, I thought. There were a couple of good ones. I suppose this is something about our modern lives now that I can't really remember any of the commercials from the Super Bowl.
No, I just remember the Bud Light Game of Thrones crossover one, simply because
I do remember
those
terrible commercials that were trying to sell us mass market beer with things that people who buy mass market beer don't really care about.
Corn syrup, yes.
Corn syrup, wind power. This beer was made sustainably with wind power. Thanks, Bud. That was one, and then there was another one. It's like genetically modified ingredients too, and it was like, it was Bud Light putting the labels on the beer. It's like, don't need the labels, guys.
I remember the Avengers and the Captain Marvel thing, because I definitely took a timeout from watching the game to help some friends on Twitter understand who Captain Marvel was. That was probably the most entertaining I had with the television. And then the other thing is, I mean, the kids were playing well, and I you know what, I'm just going to give your child a one of the 3 stars for being an excellent child host. And my daughter very much enjoyed herself, and your daughter and your son were excellent. So I was really impressed with the children.
They escaped the punishment wheel that night. It's pretty random. It's pretty much every night they get something, but that night they didn't get it. Just to be clear, folks, there is no punishment wheel. Don't call child services.
All right. I mean, look.
I mean, yeah, there was just, it was such a blasé game, you know. It was, you know, when if the Super Bowl's exciting, we usually try and make it a point. All right, let's podcast, you know, the next week or the week after. But when it's a game like this, I respect the Patriots' ability to scheme. They seem to operate much more on a, you know, that they're not a systems-based team. They're a scheme-based team. They like look at what their opponent's going to do every week, and then they say, okay, what can we do to have that opponent beat themselves, to play with their left hand? And they did that well, which they have done well for about 18 years now, 19 years. So it was, you know, hats off to them, but it was even they didn't play great. Brady threw an interception on his first pass. There were missed field goals. There were some sloppy penalties. It was despite what Trey Wingo says, I don't buy into the narrative that like, oh, we just don't respect defensive football. I've enjoyed some 12-9 type games before. This game was just not well played nor entertaining. So frustrating to watch as a fan.
Trey Wingo directly needs like to keep people excited about football in a way that we don't. So I understand that, you know, he does well if the game does well. So yeah, he's the man, you know. And we're not the man. We're the men. I don't know. Do I have to offer platitudes to the Patriots? Like, no. Of course they're great. So, like, whatever. Like, nothing I say matters. No. Eat at Arby's, kids.
Yeah. No, they're you know, this is insert Robert Kraft joke here. There, we can just move on from now.
Yeah, and just so folks know, we're not going to talk. We made a conscious decision to not have a conversation about the Robert Kraft issue. Go look it up on your own. It just seems like a great way for all of us to get into trouble. So,
human trafficking is bad.
It's horrible.
Let's begin and end there.
Right. Will, you know what? How about this? And we can discuss this briefly now. If and when there is resolution that has football consequences, we'll go there and we'll talk about it. But
sure,
pretty much everyone here thinks it's like gross and just not worth accidentally saying something not appropriate. Okay, so Super Bowl thoroughly discussed. Let us move on to the patron saint of this podcast, the Buffalo Bills, Our Lady of Terrible Football. They finished the season with 6 wins. They will draft 9th. They have a rookie quarterback. They have a few other things. They have a really nice color scheme. And we have a lot.
They can't beat the old red, white, and blue.
No, hey, America. So I emailed you guys these questions, and I realized for Scott's taste, they weren't as well crafted as they could have been, as his lengthy reply email made clear. But hopefully he muddled through my mess of English enough to cobble together some thoughts.
Dear sir, please reconsider this agenda. I consider it seriously illogical.
Scott made our agenda much stronger, which is very true. We don't need to repeat ourselves as often as I did, because I was definitely in the brainstorming agenda when I sent it along. But what I'd like to do is discuss our impressions of last year, what we think of last season, and in particular in the context of where we thought they were going to end up at the beginning of the season, and compare it to, last season in total, because now we have 2 full McDermott seasons under our belt, McBean seasons really under our belt. And so it's time to start really kind of doing that. Paul, why don't you get us started? However you want to start this conversation about your review of the 2018 Bills.
Yeah, and I think I am relatively pleased with where they are at today, which is not to say they have a winning roster today. The plan is clearly going to work perfectly, and they are going to be a playoff team next year and a Super Bowl contender the season after that. One thing, when I was going through the This Day in Bills headlines research for this week, I made note of a couple headlines, which are not part of the trivia portion of the show, but which, were just from 2016 that kind of jumped out at me. One was, Whaley confident Bills can solve cap issues. And another one that said, cap relief, Bills restructure Clay's contract. And I'm sure that's something we'll get into later as well. But to see the mess that this team was in 3 years ago with, approximately 40% or maybe even more allotted to 4 starting defensive linemen of their salary cap space, with no clear-cut person who was going to get, at least a 3 to 4 year tryout, if you will, 3 to 4 year development opportunity, let's call it, to be the franchise quarterback. So that was part of the position that we were in. There seemed to be no really solid young players who were going to be part of the future, which is evident in the fact that so many of the young players from that era are no longer on the Bills roster, and many are no longer on an NFL roster as well. But now we have Trey White, we have Matt Milano. We saw them do great things this year, and you hope Matt Milano's injury toward the end of the season does not limit him going forward, because he looked like he would be, a truly special player at linebacker. They've made good decisions at the safety position to get 2 excellent safeties who played well again this year. The Poyer took a step back, but again, very reasonable contracts as well. So the positives, when I look at last season, 6-10, that's, I picked 5-11. So it was what, relatively was expected. We saw Josh Allen play better than I think any of us expected. So that was a positive. And they shed pretty much all of the old dead contracts that were holding them down. So all those are positive signs for the future. The difficult sign for the future to me that they're going to have to work on, even though, is that they don't have a very strong roster right now, and they have to really have a great draft, and they have to do really well in free agency to supplement their roster, because right now it is a very weak roster overall. And, what can they do to rectify that? But, all in all, compared to the playoff year before, it was a necessary season to get on track for the long term. And, let's hope they make the right decisions in the coming weeks and months.
Scott.
I mean, Paul hit on a number of really good points. It's difficult to evaluate the season on its own. I think you do kind of have to evaluate it as part of a process, and it depends on your time frame of your evaluation. As Paul said, like, if you go back into the history of Bills teams, we've had 6-10 teams that have had, in some ways, less promise than this one did, to a certain extent, that were older or didn't have the same kind of potential in front of them. But at the same time, I don't think that I can confidently, I agree with Paul that in some ways the easy thing is to simply, blow up the team,
right,
and trade it all in to try and get your first round draft pick and spend it on the QB and then pin it all on them. In some ways, that's the easy part, because pretty much anyone can take that formula and execute it. It's the hard part is getting the first round QB right, and then putting the rest of the team around them to help him win and help the team win and get to where you need to be.
Right.
So it really depends. I think last season had some good signs. I think that McDermott and Bean have done a slightly better job of drafting than Whaley did. I will also say that some of the reason that obviously a lot of those guys are in the league is because McDermott and Bean have gotten rid of them or are not on the team, is because they've just simply cut them. And that some of that is for performance. Some of that is just because they have this culture thing they're trying to work on, which is fair, but it also is kind of like that has limitations too, to a certain extent. So I don't want to be... It's tough to provide a verdict on the season without attaching other value to it, either as juxtaposed to the playoff year or as a perspective going forward. So it is certainly, I don't want to say it's encouraging, but I'm happy that they've made some of this tough decisions that frequently teams don't make or don't get enough credit, or either don't make or they don't do when they need to. So that is something they did.
That's actually good to hear, because I have I think a pointed question that might tease a bit more out of you in a minute. I, for my part, took a little note taking on the team, just some of the team numbers versus 2017 and 2018. I mean, they scored 302 points in 2017 and only 269 last year, which was 30th, which is amazing to think that there were two teams that scored fewer points than the Bills.
Got to be the Cardinals. I can't imagine who else would have possibly scored fewer than the Bills.
I didn't.
I'll look it up. But
you do it, because I only looked at the Bills team page, and I almost went and said, I wonder who the two worst teams are. The points against, 359 in 2017, 374, both good for 18th. So from a points, they gave up a few more points, but I feel like when you look at the defense in yards against, they actually got 2 more turnovers than the year before, and they gave up 1,200 fewer yards. They went from 5,600 yards to 4,700 yards, good for second overall last year. So, I mean, it underscores how for me, it underscores, and if you're curious, the offense was about the same yards wise, 4,800 yards versus 4,778. I mean, there's a difference of about 50 yards, but those 50 points came from, I mean, if you think about how they moved the ball about as well, yards total wise, but it changed. More of it came in the running game than in the passing game from 2018 and 2017, which you would expect given Josh Allen and the ineffective Nate Peterman and the other quarterback issues and the wide receiving issues, not having Tyrod Taylor, who's, I think we've established is an above replacement level quarterback, if not a good one, necessarily. But to me, it sort of confirms bless you. It confirms two things for me. First of all, that this defense was really good, and it got very much lost in the shuffle. And the only explanation is because of how terrible the offense was. There were games early in the season, and there were games at different times in the seasons where this defense was getting blown out, and to still end up only giving up the second most yards in the league is kind of impressive when you play the Patriots twice and you think about that Ravens game and some other stuff. The Bills offense, they went fewer points per drive. It was 1.9 versus 1.5 points per drive, which neither one sounds good, and they also had fewer plays per drive. But they were having more time per drive on average, which again just says they were running the ball more, right? The clock was running more, and it wasn't really helping them that it was running more. They managed to get any offense out of Josh Allen's legs, but ultimately the line and the receiving core, and I mean ultimately every facet of the offense, the quarterback and the running backs too, and the tight end, they just weren't up to snuff. And that's after 2 years of taking pieces away. Sammy Watkins, Robert Woods, Eric Wood, Incognito. Thank you very much. Tyrod Taylor,
Ronald Darby.
Well, I was just sticking with the offense, but
oh, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, offensively, they've been taking pieces away, and they got away with it a bit last year, and then with a less productive McCoy, it showed. Now, if you had managed to get 40 more points, if you had managed to score just on the 2017 level, do they go 9-7 again? Really, the answer is maybe. That's a strong maybe that if they just managed to score, 300 points instead of 270, that they'd have been, in the playoff hunt longer. And I feel like we've said this before on different. I know in the Fitz years, I was saying this about the defense. If we could get league average defense, we'd probably end up in the playoffs. And if you could get league average offense out of this team, you would be a playoff team, really. And so Paul identified some of the concerns on the defensive side of the ball. Some of the people, Matt Milano needs to come back. It does need to get shored up. Defense is variable from year to year, more so than offense. So I wouldn't bank on repeating with the number 2 yards defense overall again, but at least that was an issue with Rex Ryan, right? He was supposed to be able to maintain or do something like that, and he couldn't.
Yeah, he took Jim Schwartz's defense and just screwed it into the ground.
He did. and they had a good defense last year that with a lot of turnovers, and they became a very good defense in a lot of ways this year. So you would want that offense to sort of it. You can almost not imagine it getting worse, but knock on wood, that doesn't happen. That is sort of my pointed question then. That I was I'll turn to Scott first, and to you. I look at this and my impression, I wrote down, on the whole, it is consistent with a rebuilding team. The one side of the build got better and the other side got worse in some ways, but A, you expected it, and B, it got worse because you were sort of making room to make it better. So I feel like the Bills are in a better position now at 6-10 than they were last year at 9-7 going forward. Do you agree with that statement or feeling, or do you not agree with that? Do you feel like they are better or worse, or do you feel like they're going to get better or worse? Like, what's your optimism? I mean,
I would say the ceiling is higher, the floor is lower, and that is probably a good thing, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
I think it's very difficult to say how that the Tyrod Taylor team would have evolved if they didn't try and blow it up, because you can try and fix that team too. Now, and as I said before, I don't know that team. I'm fairly sure that was about the ceiling in terms of, the ceiling for that team was certainly like lower than this team, and it showed in terms of like the lack of games that they blew people out. There wasn't a lot of explosive plays on offense or defense. That was a fairly solid team that made it into the playoffs. And if you ran that team out there 10 years in a row against, presumably kind of the similar schedule, 1 year you might get a good draw in the playoffs and you might make it to the AFC Championship game maybe, and you're not in the division with New England, because obviously like this team is also like, I don't think this team is currently postured to be New England either, just because they're evil and they don't play football the way the rest of the league does. But if I would say that team would be able to get in the playoffs, 5 out of 10 years, and maybe one of those years they'd get through the conference championship game, and that's not terrible. Like that team had talent on it, it had good players on it, and it may not have been super sustainable over the long term, because obviously those guys would have gotten older. And so what they did was they essentially just said, let's just blow it up now and really start to try and build the core, and that's kind of big McBean's philosophy, is that we want a core of young guys to get us through, and then we build through the draft, and then we add free agency pieces as necessary. But ideally, we're just re-signing new guys, re-signing guys we already have. And I think that is a more viable long-term solution. But obviously, it's more risky because you had something that was working before. So that's my answer.
Was that a yes or a no?
I said,
if I made you say one word answer, if I put you on do you feel better about the team now that as compared to a year ago?
Do I feel better about the team now? There's your word.
All right.
I will be more definitive, and I'll say yes. I do feel better about the team now, which is not to say that all of the red flags that Scott just raised now, as well as the ones that we all raised in the first segment, aren't legitimate. They all are very, very legitimate. The reason in the Whaley era, we'll just call it the Whaley era, what he was always trying to seemingly do was to add to a, talented playoff contending, but not great team. But he didn't ever leave himself enough money to do so, to add the pieces, and he was more missed than hit with his draft picks, including QB with the EJ Manuel miss, so he was not a bad talent evaluator. There have been a lot of good players, but you look at the players that left the team, who were good. There were players that they simply could no longer afford. I do not worry that is as much going to be the case with this team. I doubt, and Brandon Beane's letter to fans saying they were going to be judicious in free agency, that they're going to be, they weren't going to just break the bank for everyone, means that I expect at the end of this year, Matt Milano will have fully recovered. They can give him a 5th-year option or try to extend him. Trey White, same deal. 2 good young guys in the core who you want there to be with the team for a while. You want to see Josh Allen develop, save up some money for him in the long run. You want to see Zay Jones do the same. And so that's all about building that young core that Scott talked about and that I don't feel they ever really had in the Whaley era. The Whaley era seemed to be much more, remember, he traded away picks to get Sammy Watkins. He was more focused on the here and now than the future. And it's good to be focused on the here and now. You never know when, the NFL is eventually going to shut down because the, AAFL or whatever the heck it's called overtakes it. So you need to want to try to win now. And they did that in the 9-7 season. But while you're doing that, you also have to be cognizant that there's probably going to be a future, and you really, really want to win when that future comes. And what we're experiencing now, we'd either be experiencing this with Whaley here, with him finally admitting this was not a viable thing, and I had to break down the roster and then build up a new core, or we just keep restructuring contracts. We would keep having the same veteran type team that doesn't have any superstars, but has a number of good players on it. And we'd be somewhere between 7-9 and 9-7 every year. And we would all be frustrated that, there was seemingly no end to mediocrity in sight. Even if they were good, they would never be great. And if they were, even though they'd never be terrible, they'd still never be great. And so I feel now, with a huge caveat aside, that they have a lot of roster building to do, and it's not all going to be done this offseason, no matter how well they do in free agency and the draft, that I do feel better so far than I did a year ago at this time.
Okay, there you go.
That's so fine. Yeah, I'll say yeah. Okay.
Oh, okay. I mean, I do too. I think that we've all nailed it. It's not an entirely fair question, but I think that the opportunity for growth is finally here in a way that it wasn't last year, right? Like, you are now in a position where, last year you couldn't really add talent. You could keep the talent, some of the talent you had, but if you didn't really believe in that talent, then, you were just sort of, I think the Doug Whaley comparison is right. Like, he was sort of keeping guys around that were good enough and not necessarily going to be great. And there was no reason to think they were going to be great. And he threw some good money after bad with that Sammy Watkins pick. Like, there should have been a clear sense of maybe how EJ Manuel was. And if, Brandon Beane is trading up for some freaking reason to get a wide receiver, it might be fair to say that this year. Not that there's any scuttlebutt that he'll do that, but I think that the book is still open on Josh Allen before we're going to, say he's better than EJ Manuel necessarily. But, I'm with you guys on this. I feel better about this team and where it is than I think certainly where I was at the beginning of the year. And I think comparing the two teams, I feel like this is it. I'm excited because year 3 gets to be the make or break year fairly. Right?
Yep.
Paul is correct. You're not going to get all the talent you want, but there needs to be a clear improvement from the team this year. Otherwise, what are we doing? And I think that that's going to be a fair question for ownership and fans to ask if they don't put together a better football team this year. One that I think, and we'll talk about it. I'll go first because being the host, I rarely do, but I'll go first. For me, year 3, there's going to be a couple of different ways to talk about what success is. Year 3 being a make or break team, for me, I think it needs to be a 9-win season again. I think they got to be on par with what they did 2 years ago. If they win 9 games and don't make the playoffs, I'm not going to feel great about it. But I think that what the other thing is, I'll look for the metric, obviously, is offense. Did they get the quarterback right? Did they put pieces around? Whatever you do, even if you screw up and get the wrong pieces, okay? If Josh Allen doesn't look better next year, then it's on you anyway. Whether it's because you didn't surround him with the right talent or because you picked the wrong quarterback or both. This is it now. You've had your time, and he needs to look better, and the offense needs to look better. And if you have a team that was able to cobble together 6 wins with one of the worst offenses in the league, then you need to do better than that. You need to have, league average offense, I think. Even if the defense takes a step back and is like a top 10 or 12th best defense, the offense needs to step forward. And for me, the wins have got to go up, and I think you need a winning season. I think that 8 wins is going to start to feel like Dick Duran, and, not that he ever got to 8 wins, but it's going to start feeling like too much more of the same. Do you Scott, why don't you go first? And what is your metric for what's better, and how do you want to assess it, and what do you want to say to anything I said?
So I think the one thing that I would want is I would want to know what the plan is for the team, and I would want to see that progress being executed towards that plan. Mm-hmm. So in the sense of like, I don't think that they're going to do this, but I could see them saying like, there weren't that many great free agents out there. And so we're mostly going to build through the draft this year. And if they spent, a first-round pick on a wide receiver and a second-round pick on a guard and a third-round pick on a tackle, and the team ends up 6-10 again, I'm not sure that I'm going to throw the towel in, because that would be it's kind of a lot to expect the offense to get that much better with a lot more new people in it, like literally new to professional football people. If they made a more earnest effort this year to do like they did, the same thing in the draft, but then they also went out and spent 3/4 of that $80 million on another wide receiver and another offensive lineman to really, move the chips into the middle of the table, kind of, so to speak. And then they still ended up at 6-10. Then I would have some serious questions about whether or not this plan was being executed effectively. And then that's if the plan is, and to me, that is the sound plan. And we'll get to more of the details of that later, of what we want them to do in the offseason. But if they go out and they spend, they get the first round pick, I understand we're thin at defensive tackle. I don't think you can take a first round defensive tackle. I understand that we're a little concerned maybe about, who Lorenzo Alexander is, what his role is going to be in the out years. So we go out and spend, $10 million a year to get some, joker free agent who's going to replace him, next year or something. Like, those are the kind of moves where I don't know what your plan doesn't seem sound to me. And then therefore I don't really care if you can execute it that well, because I don't think you've got the correct plan. And I don't think you're able to plan. You're able to take your vision of a young core and tie that to a plan that actually gets you where you want to go. So I would need to see. That's kind of what I'm using for the metric of successes.
Okay.
I'm glad to be going third, because I feel my answer falls really in between where your guys does. I like Frank. I do want to see a better record. I do think they need to show some tangible improvement there, and I would not be satisfied with another 6-10 team. We do need Allen to perform better, both because he's surrounded by a better talent and because he's developing. But to Scott's point, we do need to see the plan evolving. We do need to see what this process is that we've heard so much about. Okay, so you fixed some of the run defense last year by signing Star Lotulelei. We see what you're doing in the secondary because your safeties fit your scheme so well. We got that. Okay, now what are you going to do to not just keep this defense from regressing, which I believe was Frank who noted earlier, the defense tends to be a year-to-year thing. How are you going to keep them progressing to the point where they're going to become an elite defense? And it's not going to be easy, because one thing we did not bring up is that the Bills were one of the healthiest teams in the league last year, in that they were struck by the injury bug less than most. So if they'd been injured more, that 6-10 record might not have even been attainable. So they've got to stay healthy again. They have to develop this defense to keep progressing. And of course, the offense needs to improve by leaps and bounds. I did check after we were debating earlier who scored less in Buffalo. It was, of course, the Doug Marrone-led Jaguars, in addition to Arizona, that scored less than Buffalo. But as bad as the Jaguars in Arizona were, they were what I consider the Bills unacceptably low in the points that they scored last season. They need to put up a lot of points. There's no, I mean, how many points did they score last year? I'll quickly check on ESPN. But you look at the metrics that have been sent around the league. The teams like the Rams, the Patriots, the Chiefs, and who else was in a conference? The Saints. All four of those teams are teams that can score points. The Patriots had 436 last year. The Chiefs 565. The Rams 3. Oh, I'm sorry, that's a Super Bowl. 527, and the Saints 504. All the Patriots were the bad offense by virtue of scoring 436 points, which is about 167 points more than Buffalo did at 269. So Buffalo's not only got to break 300, they need to break 400, get some points on the board. We need to see Allen, develop and do all those things that we talked about happening. And I feel if they do those things, and the big caveat, stay healthy, they should at the very least next year, to Frank's point, be in playoff contention. And then to Scott's point, we can see what the long-term scheme is with how they want to be successful on offense, how they want to be successful on defense.
Yeah. Would you guys feel comfortable? I mean, let's say they do well. It's hard to think about it, but like if they did show leaps and bounds, like they showed a big improvement in the offense, but the record wasn't any better, I guess you're necessarily saying that the defense somehow got much worse. So I guess I don't really want to start going into whether you'd be willing to do that trade-off or not, because I think that's too many variables.
Right. They are losing Kyle Williams, which none of us have even brought up, and that's not exactly a small loss, both in terms of leadership and in terms of performance. He was still a well above average three technique defensive tackle by most metrics. So you're not going to throw any old guy in there and not regress.
Right. Let's do one more topic on this year versus last year, and then we'll do some quick news and notes and move forward to the future. Josh Allen, I will freely admit that this time last year on the confidence scale, I was probably a 1 out of 10 for him.
I believe, Frank, you are the one who, during the draft preview episode, said, unless the Bills, believe every metric that's ever been used to analyze an NFL quarterback is wrong and draft Josh Allen, ... I believe it was something along those lines.
I think that was...
But I agreed with you. I think Scott agreed with you, too. So.
I think that was what everybody was saying. That's what every metric website was saying. And it wasn't... There were other people who were very much no, he's got all the classic... talent of all the classic tools a quarterback can have. So, and they were able to pick quarterbacks before big metrics. I don't know. I will say that if I was a 1 out of 10 this time last year on Josh Allen, I'm a 5 out of 10 now, which is 1, a big improvement. I don't want to sound like I'm slighting him, but 2, leaving a lot of room for still not sure on him yet, but I would be willing to give him a chance going. I'm very much willing to give him a chance going forward. I was excited by what I saw, certainly in the second half of the season. I am ready to entertain the idea of what it might be like for him to play with more talented players and to see how that improves him. Paul, go for it. I mean, what's your Josh Allen take?
I mean, I think this is one, and we've all addressed this already. There needs to be much we've talked about the receiving weapons. They need offensive linemen. They need receivers, and they need to have that happen, or else it's going to be difficult for me or anyone to answer that question on, what we need to see from him to improve, because he's going to be in the same situation he was this year and running for his life half the time. So I'm going to make the big assumption that they make enough fixes to the line, the running game, and the receivers that it at least provides him with a better environment in which to succeed than he has now. So that's conclusion I'm going to jump to in order to answer the question, which is we need to see him win a game at some point with his arm this season. And JP Lossman was able to do that. That is Ryan Fitzpatrick did that with some degree of regularity. We did not see Josh do that during the course of his rookie season. Some of that's his fault. Some of it's not. Some of it's Charles Clay not catching a pass in Miami on what was one of the most beautiful closing drive. We would be talking about that drive still because they started they're 7 and like 3 to 4 passes and less than 20 seconds of clock later, they were inside the Miami 40. It was just a thing of beauty. So you want to see that. You want to see him win a game with his arm. 2, there needs to be better consistency from Allen. I want to see fewer of those bad decisions where he's like, you know what? I'm just going to throw it into traffic. This does not mean I do not want him to be bold still, to throw it deep downfield, to try some things, especially on 3rd down. But when it's, the last drive of the game against the Jets at home, a team you should beat, and it's a non-urgent down, like 2nd and 6 or whatever it was, and you just throw it to one receiver who is being blanketed by 2 Jets, that costs you games. So he needs to have much better decision-making on a consistent basis. And as he does those things, what I expect to see is an offense that moves the ball, an offense that is a passing offense where he's thrown for 3,500-ish yards even, let's say, because 3,000 is not a big deal anymore. So let's say 3,500 yards. We want to see him throw more touchdowns and interceptions than he didn't do, which he didn't do last year. And while I hesitate to use statistics as specific benchmarks because so much goes into those should be reasonable objectives for him to achieve that I would really want to see out of him this year.
So Allen, for me, I think the biggest shift in where we thought, at least I thought he was going into last season, is I don't think we saw the running, which obviously is a nice dynamic element to his game that adds something to any offense when you're able to add a quarterback who's running. Other than that, there were a lot of the holes in the game that we had seen, that were kind of a part of the pre-draft kind of scouting process. So yeah, I like Frank's model of like the 1 to 10. So I think I was probably at like a 2 or 2.5 out of 10 last year. And now I'm up to like a 4.5, maybe a 5. So it's on my mythical scale. It's very precise. So I think that's obviously that's good, but yeah, I don't think that there's any guarantee that he's going to have the sophistication to run an NFL offense the way that doesn't get you beat by New England. And that's kind of the thing is New England can pretty much pull anybody apart if all you're doing is running a couple kind of set plays or a couple easy reads, a couple little picks back and forth and things off of screen passes and little adjustments and stuff. They're gonna see through that pretty quick, and a good defensive game planner will. And I think maybe Belichick will retire and no one's able to replace him. That would be super, but until that happens, I think we have to assume that that's the standard, and that is not just Allen to do that. That's obviously Daboll and the rest of the coaching staff having to come up with a plan that Allen can execute. But that is not. I don't think I saw that from Allen last year, and that's what I'm looking for more of. I want to see more professional style offense. I want to be able to have him do more checks at the line that are to different pass plays rather than to just kind of check to run or check to a different run. I want to be able to see him make intelligent decisions about when to throw the ball away when he's not able to run. I think he had made progress over the course of the season. Obviously, this is a tremendously important offseason, so it'll be key to see how it all kind of comes together, obviously.
Okay. Yes, that I think is enough of about what we should talk about from last year, because so much is going to depend on. I mean, after we do some free agency and some drafting, I think we will have many more. I think that might crystallize some of our opinions on, what we make of McBean and what we make of this team. Because if they suddenly start drafting defensive tackles in the first round, I imagine Scott, if not all of us, are going to have something to say about it. So, Paul, we have some news and notes, and if I remember correctly, you said something along the lines of you keeping track of news and notes. So I invite you to run down briefly the news and notes for this team.
All right, let's see if I can stick to the actual human definition of briefly. First thing that we want to quickly mention, Charles Clay officially cut. Certainly not a surprise for any of us to see this. We'll anticipate this well in advance of him being a healthy scratch against the New England Patriots, the penultimate week of the season. As a recap, this adds, unfortunately, $4.5 million of dead money to the Bills cap, which puts them just a shade over $7.5 million, which is not ideal before the league year, but considering what we've had to deal with this past year, seems wonderful. And it also saves them $4.5 million in salary. It was worth the $4.50 to get rid of Charles Clay.
That's a lunch at Potbelly, so
Yeah. Even
if you get the skinny, not if you get the full sandwich, right?
That's true, but okay, never mind. Then we should have.
It's a side at Nando's, maybe. Right. I don't know. So that was news one. News two: the Bills signed center offensive guard Spencer Long of the Jets back on February 12th. That was a 3-year deal. I won't go through everything regarding that deal. We'll just say it's $1.2 million guaranteed. He's likely going to earn $2.65 million if he can make the roster and stick on it all next season. We all pray to God, I think it's safe to say, that this is a depth signing, that he is nowhere near a starting lineup, unless, of course, all of his performance issues last year had to do with the broken finger, which, some people are hoping for. But I just hope this is a backup. If they can't get the guy they want in the free agency or the draft, he's on the roster. All right. Yeah. Go ahead, Scott.
No, I mean, that's what it sounds like. I mean, it's odd that a guy with this many starts was able to kind of be this bad, because
but he was with the Jets is of course the caveat. So
but he was with the Skins before that too, and he started with the Skins. Now, not exactly, the Skins are certainly also not like the Patriots in terms of quality players, but at the same time, like, he has a number of starts, so at least you've got that. That is kind of what you want from the backup, is at least he's able to understand how the offense works and is a professional. So let's hope that's it. And then as far as Charles Clay, boy, all the opportunities were there for him, and he never was. Some of that, obviously was the offenses and the quarterbacks he was playing with it, but ultimately some of it was on him. He just never took advantage of a huge amount of opportunities for a huge amount of targets because we had no one else to catch balls the last 2 years.
Yeah, this just don't suck.
He was good in Miami. Like, that was the thing. Like, he was a good player there. It was I can't blame Whaley. I mean, you can blame him for the contract, but ultimately the market is what the market is. But I don't think you could assume that, like, the tight end going into 26 or 27 is gonna get suddenly a lot worse. I mean,
I guess some of it too is like they never used him right in his early years, and then by the end of the time, he was definitely like one of the not our guy. He's not our guy, so I don't really care if he works out or not. And but it was a shame all around. And
yep, we wished some of it was injury too, so he can't really be fully blamed on that regard. But boy, that was a mess. Didn't work out in any way. So sad face. The Bills re-signed defensive back Lafayette Pitts the same day they signed Spencer Long. Again, defensive backfield depth, we may or may not be worth commenting on. And then the last re-signing to mention is linebacker, but more importantly, special teamer Deon Lacey was re-signed last week. He led the Bills in special teams snaps in 2017 and 2018, and I could not have told you that. So obviously this was a more important sign than I gave it credit for when it was made. So it'll be good to have him back on the roster. That leaves for free agents Groy, Mills, Miller, Jordan Phillips, and Logan Thomas, which we can talk more about later. But any thoughts on the Pitts and Lacey re-signings?
Not particularly.
Got to keep that special teams intact.
Yes. Now that
bunch of game changers last year,
especially with special teams might not be a thing in about a year. So
that's true.
Yeah.
Well, who knows what the kickoff will be at that point in time.
Right.
The last bit of news and notes want to mention is the Bills did replace their quarterbacks coach. They've hired former NFL QB Ken Dorsey to take on that role. So he did not come up in our discussion of Josh Allen's development, but he's going to be a key figure in how that goes or in the coming months.
Ken Dorsey, human quarterback. So that's a plus for him.
National, I believe national championship with the U back in the 2000, if I'm not mistaken.
I feel like it's those. Is it Snickers commercials that are doing it now? That are like, I'm definitely one of the tattoo artists in the town. Don't worry, buddy. It's going to be okay. You're like, oh, just okay. I'm definitely one of the tattoo artists in town.
Doctor.
Yeah, the doctor.
Licensed. Me.
How you feeling? Are you nervous? Yeah, me too.
Don't worry, we'll work it out when we get in there.
Right, Ken. Yeah, I don't know who. It's a great commercial. I think it's for Snickers. I'm not sure.
They haven't done a good job because we remember the commercial. But
right. So Ken Dorsey, definitely a person who played quarterback. So
yep. And here's an interesting fact. He was correct. Scott was correct. He did win a championship for the U. When he went to the Cleveland Browns, he was competing for their second string position behind Charlie Fry in 2006 with a gentleman named Derek Anderson.
Oh yeah. Hey.
Yeah. 12 years. Now they're back in the same room in a different way.
Welcome back. It's like a reunion. He's like, yeah, come be a Bills. He's like, you could just be a quarterback and get a concussion and then not have to play.
Yeah, that's suit up, Ken. We need you.
Okay, so the combine starts this week. Obviously, that's draft stuff. Scott rightly pointed out there's not much to talk about it until after it's happened. There actually won't be that much to say about it until after it's happened, other than we know Mr. So-and-so's hand size and,
there's barely much to say after the combine happens.
Exactly, right. But free agency will happen before the draft, and the Bills are certainly in a cap position to spend some money here and get better. Lots of positions of need, newly opening at tight end that we just talked about. Obviously, plenty of room at wide receiver and offensive line. Just to kind of name a handful of things. Is it unthinkable that the Bills wouldn't do a big free agent signing? And if so, where do you think they're going to go? I mean, I'm hopeful that they will sign, since I don't have the breadth of knowledge. I'll go first. Matt Pardis sounds like a great signing to me, the center from Denver. I think because I had heard that he had gotten, he was in a position where he was calling the offensive blocking schemes for the quarterbacks in Denver who were struggling. And that sounds like a nice thing for Josh Allen to not have to think about. And so if he's good at it and can say, okay, this is what the blocking scheme is and relay that, and Allen only has to focus on what the passing dimensions or the handoff dimensions are, then that sounds like a nice thing for your young quarterback. I'm also interested in what you guys think might be good. Also, I just prefer established linemen because I feel like that's one of those positions that takes time to learn in a way that, not that wide receivers don't have to learn things or running backs don't have to learn things, but you can rely a lot more on your instinct and your talent, I believe, at those positions to get some things done, if not all things. But feel free to call me a moron, one of you, and just let me have it.
All right, I'll go first here. Scott has, of course, posted a link, which I'll about free agency. So we'll use that as a guide if I don't zool because of opening it. But I want to note that former Rams general manager Charles Armey agrees with Frank on this point, specifically on center. An article in The Athletic last month when he was being asked about the free agency situation generally and specifically with regards to the Bills. He said, I would address the line through free agency if it's available at tackle and center. The lack of a center, and this goes to where Matt Pardis, we will know how to pronounce his name if he signs with the Bills. If he doesn't, screw him, we're never going to learn to pronounce it. The lack of center will hold your team back. I would get guards in the draft. You can get by with developing guards on the run as long as you get athletic guys. It's hard to develop center and tackles on the run. So we hope that the Bills get a top-of-the-line center and because that's more affordable, and then try and get a very solid tackle. If again, there's not too much going on free agency as I browse this list that Scott sent, so might be difficult to do so, but can you at least get someone who can fit in on the right side and hope Dawkins continues developing on the left? For what it's worth, in the same article in The Athletic, Brandon Beane emphasized that the O-line that practices the fundamentals and gels well will be the one that succeeds. So they're obviously looking to try and get the starting five for the foreseeable future on the team this year. I think that's the biggest place to build. On receiver, they did sign CFL star Duke Williams a month or so ago. Maybe he's what's a dark horse kid? That's a dark horse candidate who can really step up and help. You can't really depend on that, but we'll see. Because when you look at the free agent list here, no one really on the offensive side of the ball except for Le'Veon Bell, who would really help the Bills, and whether or not he can help the Bills is debatable. So good luck in the draft on offense, because you're gonna need it, because the defense seems to be where the development players are at. And I'll leave defense and anything else for Scott.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly, Paul's correct. There's really not that much that you're going to find on free agency. Certainly at wide receiver, I wouldn't mind them taking a run at Darrell Williams, who's a little bit further down on our kind of top 100 list. Tyrell Williams has him at number 43 on their list of free agency as a good player in San Diego prior to them bringing in Mike Williams in the draft last year, and then obviously having Keenan Allen. But good guy with some speed and some size. I don't know if he's a pure number one guy, but I'm also fairly sure it's going to be difficult to get a pure number one guy in the draft this year. And again, so I'd rather take a shot in free agency at a guy who's been in the league and can be a professional at least, rather than taking a random shot at a guy, because we hopefully, Foster can keep it together, and continue to give us good quality play next year and be a good solid wide receiver rotation guy. But I think we're really still in a lot of need there. We need at least one solid player. So that's why I'm thinking, free agency there is okay. But I agree in general with you guys that, interior offensive line is something that you'd go for. I think you can pay money for guards. Obviously, it worked out with Incognito for a little while, and it's worked out with other teams in the past too. There's plenty of between Paredes and Mitch Morse, a couple other guys that were poking around on this list. Roger Saffold, who is on, I think, the Rams, having guys who have starts in these leagues, guys who have made Pro Bowls. Those guys are going to be available. Yes, you're going to have to kind of overpay a little bit because it's free agency, and normally you don't want to overpay for guards. But I think this is where you do have to make that investment because, again, as you guys have said, you want these guys to get together. You have to keep Allen upright. If you want to make a run at one of these tackles who's on this list, Darrell Williams, a guy who's in Denver, and then didn't really got injured last year, but before that had some kind of all-pro caliber seasons, then I think that's reasonable. But I guess it's certainly the cupboard's bare. In terms of defense, there's really not that much. There's plenty of defensive tackles who are out there. It's just a question of how much do you want to spend there versus what your value is in the draft. I think you're still going to get good defensive tackles in your second and third round there. So I'm fine waiting there. But if you want to get somebody like I saw Malcolm Brown, who's the guy who's kind of a rotation defensive tackle for the Patriots, that's certainly somebody who could probably help. Marcus Hunt, who is on the Colts, another guy who probably has some talent that we could kind of plug in there. So I think there's plenty of guys available in free agency. I do think it's worth it to invest a little on both offense and defense in free agency, and I think the Lions is the best way to do it. So
there you go. Bill's preview of free agency. It'll be more fun to talk about it when they actually are in it and there are rumors or actual signings. But
15 days away, gentlemen.
Those rumors should start now because, what was clear last year, there was that article written by an agent or somebody who was like, yeah, pretty much the deal gets done at the combine, if not sooner. And we just don't talk about it. Like people are doing deals even though they're not allowed to do deals right now. So But we'll be there in 2 weeks, and we'll hopefully have some good stuff to talk about. Why don't we do this date and Bill's headlines to the extent that there are any?
Oh yeah,
and then we'll get out of here because it's been an hour. We've talked quite a bit, and it's been a good show. But it's
all right. We'll try and keep these to a minute each or less on these. So here we go. 2018, February 26, 2018. Blank a Bronco, blank a Giant. CBS Sports includes both Bills' moves in bold 2018 predictions. CBS Sports analyst Jason La Canfora predicts the Bills will move on from blank by trading him to the Denver Broncos for a 5th-round pick. So basically, they're speculating that this one player will go to a Bronco and this one player will go to a Giant. Can you name to the Giants? Can you name either player?
I remember the Denver one.
Be Tyrod, probably.
Yeah, that'd be Tyrod to the Broncos. And who did they think was going to be a Giant? He is not a Giant, by the way. But he's not a Bill either, and he was traded.
Cordy
Glenn. So La Canfora, it's good for him on sensing the trades, even if he got the destinations wrong. 2017, wide receiver blank factoring QB decision into whether he wants to stick with Bills. He says, everything factors in. It has to be the right amount of money to stay in Buffalo, as well as the QB decision. Yes, they don't have a quarterback right now. Tyrod is a pending free agent. EJ Manuel is coming up as a free agent. There also are many quarterbacks on the market. This was 2 years ago. Robert Woods, yes.
Hey. All right.
He found his quarterback, not in Buffalo. All right.
Not in Buffalo.
2016. This I'll give you some hints on. At QB, dual threat blank is the wild card option for Bills. When asked if he'd want a QB with similar skill set as Tyrod Taylor's as number 2, Doug Willie said that Greg Roman and his offense can be adaptable to any skill set of a quarterback. Blank would be the running threat, at least athletically, that fits this offense.
Go ahead.
I was going to say,
is this Joe Webb?
It's a good guess, but we're going to get. It's actually, this is why I need the hints, because it's going to be someone who wasn't in the NFL at this point. It's a guy that the Bills was available in the draft. The Bills didn't draft him. He went in round 4, pick 135, and in his first 3 seasons, he's made 2 Pro Bowls and 1 AP NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Tom Brady. Oh no,
only who are 2016 rookie.
Right. 4th round, huh?
Yep. So you're looking for a mobile quarterback, 4th-round pick, 2 Pro Bowls, AP NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Man, I feel like this should just jump right out at me.
Yeah, that would be fairly obvious. And yet here we are.
Not a team the Bills have played since he was drafted, so that might be one reason he's not top of mind.
Probably an NFC team.
Carson Wentz?
No, he was like in the first round.
He was the first rounder, right?
He was like the first pick. So
yeah.
He cost the longtime starter job, which is a good thing because then that starter retired and is now just a phenomenal announcer.
Oh, so this has got to be Dak Prescott.
Dak Prescott, yep.
Yeah, because you know why? Because he fell off, and it wasn't like definitely he had that terrible year in between his 2 good years.
Yeah.
And so it was like, well, is it fake or is it all Ezekiel Elliott? Okay, that's why I couldn't think of him. All right.
That's all right. All right, 2013. This one will probably be more up Scott's alley, though. Frank's got a chance. Blank meets with Bills. It really shouldn't come as yes. Good luck, Scott. That's all. All the hints you get.
Oh, well, of course. It was
It's multiple right answers, right?
Josiah Bartlett.
That might actually be right. It really shouldn't come as a surprise knowing Bills GM Buddy Nix has said the team wanted to meet face-to-face with the top prospects at the QB position this year. But USC QB blank did have a formal interview with Buffalo at the NFL Combine. USC quarterback, 2013.
2013. So this would have been before Kessler. Before Darnold, and who would it have been? Nikes. I'm tapping my foot because it's right on the tip of my tongue, but I don't think I'm going to be able to get it in the time allotted.
All right, I can give you the current team. He plays for the Buffalo Bills.
Wait, what?
Yes, this guy does play for the Bills now.
Oh, Matt Barkley.
Matt Barkley. There we go.
There we go.
Took him a while to get there, as it did Scott on the answer.
So. I had faith.
That is awful. Okay.
All right. 2011 BuffaloBills.com interview with blank, NFL's first player of full Chinese descent.
Ed Wang.
Ed Wang. Frank, right on that one. This is a terrible headline, so I'll just read it's like blank tackle impact undeniable, which is nonsense. So the context is, with the retirement of tackle blank, that puts us in a position of need, maybe even more so than we were, said new Bills coach Chan Gailey. So this was a Bills 2006 fifth-round pick, and he retired after 4 years to pursue a career in politics as a conservative, which has thankfully never emerged. He did work for Jack Kemp at Kemp Partners.
I was going to Jack Kemp's the only one I could think of.
What year was this?
2010. So this was 9 years ago. This guy retired after 4 seasons.
Remember this. Yeah, and he ran for office. I think we talked about this.
Yeah, not a memorable name, so I won't give you guys too long to guess, but it was, I remember the retirement too and think, well, this screws them a tackle, and it did.
Yeah, I don't remember.
The correct answer is Brad Butler.
I didn't remember that. It did ring a bell, though.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, 2009, Bills cut former free agent prize blank. He was one of the key prizes in free agent class of 2007, leaving Washington for Buffalo. His 7-year, $49 million deal was the highest salary for a guard at the time.
Is this Derek Dockery?
Derek Dockery.
Yeah.
What was hilarious about this is it continued. He'll still count $5.4 million against the Bills' cap this year, but that's less than they would have counted if he'd stayed on the roster, which is $5.85 million. They literally wanted to save $485,000 and eat $5.4 million just to get him off the roster.
Wow. Who was the other one there?
Langston Walker.
Langston Walker, right? I was going to say they signed two terrible, which, like not to be Cassandra here, but that could happen this year. They could sign two huge guard deals and be like...
And that was worse because that pushed the franchise left tackle off the roster because both those contracts pissed off Jason Peters, and then they ended up trading him. Terrible. All right, 2004. Should the Bills sign blank so he can retire as a Buffalo Bill? It says, off the field, he was far from perfect. He did his share of whining at contract time and certainly angered his share of sports writers, but nobody meant more to the Bills' defense in their heyday.
Bruce Smith.
Bruce Smith. You guys are doing well today. It's like you guys know we want to actually end this segment in a reasonable amount of time.
No, I just was trying to think of he had spent so many years chasing the sack number on different teams that 2004. That's amazing. He was still playing.
Yep. Derek Dockery.
Derek, yeah.
2000
Scott has a lag.
Yeah, this is a delay. Yeah, right. 2-minute delay. All right, 2002, though this is telling a story about an older event. 2002, from Buffalo Bills safety to Superman. It says, blank was a rookie free agent out of Princeton in 1988. He chose.
I know this one already. Go ahead.
All right. He chose to try out for the Bills because Mark Kelso had head injuries the previous year and knew that with Marv Levy's system, he would get a chance to play in the preseason and prove himself. Unfortunately, an old knee injury forced him to have surgery before his first preseason game, but Marv Levy told him to return next year. But his injury turned out worse than expected, and the knee never completely healed, and he had to retire.
George Reeves.
Yes.
George Reeves, yes.
George
20, 30 years after 20 to 30 years after his death in 2002.
Yeah. No, this was Dean Cain from The Adventures of Lois and Clark. Yeah, with Terry Hatcher.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I am well versed, and there was no way I was not going to know somebody who was both Superman and a Buffalo Bill.
Yep.
So
well done. Marv Levy once said, "Hey, people said we had a super team. We're so good, we cut Superman."
Right.
All right. 1999, blank close to extension. Bloomberg News is reporting that blank's agent Jack Mula is saying his client is close to sign a 2-year.
Time out. The agent's name is Jack Mula.
Jack Mula. I'm not making that up. It's M-U-L-A. I wish it were M-O-O-L-A-H.
Okay, go ahead.
But I didn't even make that connection. So I wonder if he's still around. That'll be a question for next pod.
Steve $.
He eventually fired Jack Mula for Mikey Fatstacks.
Right.
Okay. Saying his client is close to signing a 2-year contract extension with the Bills that will lock him up through the 2001 season and should free up $1 million in salary cap room. Very key player in 99, but lost his starting job controversially and was off the team after the 2000 season.
Doug Flutie?
Doug Flutie, the master of the dropkick.
All right.
I feel like half the ones from 1999 are Doug Flutie. I feel
he was the team in 1999.
It's a tough era because it's either when I'm doing from that time, it's like names you won't recognize or Doug Flutie.
Right.
So
Marcellus Wiley, Doug Flutie, or that's it.
I tried Dusty Ziegler once and that didn't work out well. All right. 1996, 2 to go. Buffalo Bills re-signed blank defensive end to a 3-year contract.
Defensive end, 1996. It won't be Bruce again.
It won't be Bruce again. I would not double up.
It won't be Bruce again. I don't know.
He is a fellow Wall of Famer, though probably doesn't deserve that honor, but he's got it.
Really? And I'm blanking on him.
Super Bowl era defensive end. I remember he retired after the 2001 season.
I'm going to feel bad now. So it was Smith, and for some reason all I can think of is linebackers.
Patrick Ewing.
I'm going Conlon, Talley, Bennett, Smith.
You're working your way through the front 7.
I am, and I'm blanking on the nose tackle and the other defensive end.
Oh, you guys might kick yourself, but the time is up. It is Phil Hansen.
Oh, Phil, you know what? Phil Hansen.
Oh, I definitely actually do remember him, and I feel bad because he was good.
He wore number 90, right? 90.
Yeah, number 90, Phil Hansen.
See, because I always thought you could do a jersey that had 1-2 for Kelly, 3-4 for Thomas, 5-6 for Talley, 7-8 for Smith, and 9-0 for Hansen. And I felt like, Hansen and Talley are kind of the low men on the totem pole there, but it works.
That's something like a true number file would notice. So that is well done. All right, last one, gentlemen. 1994. You got to go back 25 years when it's the offseason to get 10 of these. Seahawks signed blank. 2-time Pro Bowl cornerback blank left the Buffalo Bills and signed a 4-year, $8.4 million contract with the Seattle Seahawks. He said, I wanted to get it done and sign with a good team. The 7-year veteran has played his entire career with the Bills and appeared in the last 4 Super Bowls. He intercepted a career-high 9 passes in 1993. He had 360 tackles, 26 interceptions, 9 forced fumbles, and 8 recovered fumbles for his Bills career.
See, it's funny because I remember that House Ballard also went to the Seahawks at about the same time.
Yep, same year, at the same time that Mitch Farrat went to the Seahawks, and another cornerback from the Bills, whose name I won't say because you might guess him, also went to the Seahawks. It was all within this 1 to 2 year span. The Seahawks just kept signing Bills guys they couldn't afford anymore. One of the best cornerbacks there. I don't know if he might be. I would have to take a look at the Bills' 50th anniversary team, but I think he's on it.
Lightning McQueen.
Stop it. He was on ice the other night.
Oh, amazingly. Damn it. I knew he was in my brain.
I can think of Mark Kelso, who was a safety, and I can think of so mad because I know this. I know this name, and it's just not coming to me. Come on. Give me one more second here.
Sure.
Was it Nate Odoms?
It was Nate Odoms.
Yes.
Nicely done. Cornerback, member of the Bills' 50th anniversary team, along with cornerback Butch Bird on the other side. So
I kept thinking nasty Nate Clements, and I was like, it's not Nate Clements. There was another Nate, and it was Nate Odoms. Who are the other corners? Who was the other corner?
Kirby Jackson was the other one who went to
Kirby Jackson, right?
And he actually hurt himself before he ever got to Seattle. Never played with them. So yeah, okay. Kirby and Nate both left within a year of each other to go to Seattle. And Nate unfortunately suffered a lot of injuries too. He only ended up playing a handful of games with Seattle over a course of a few years, and that was it for his career. And then he went to the Seahawks in '96 and didn't do anything. But Yep. So that was This Day in Bills Headlines, February 26th.
And that's it for the show. I'm going to wrap. Thank you again, Paul, for putting that together. We really appreciate it. And thank you, Scott, for your contributions as well. But it's time to wrap up. Derek Dockery, right? If you'd like to say Derek Dockery for no reason, you can do so on Twitter, and you can tweet us at bbillsmny or go to facebook.com/bbillsmny. That's BBILLSMNY. You can also go bbillsmny@gmail.com, bbillsmny on Anchor. You can Google us, Buffalo Bills, maybe next year podcast. You'll find us. You can share us. You can do all the things you do. We'll be back in a few weeks, probably after free agency started and hopefully settled down a bit.
Is this technically our season finale, by the way, or do we do one more?
No, we usually go to the draft. We usually go to the draft, and then the new season.
I feel like we also called the end of the season last time too, just to be clear.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Right.
I just like to interrupt the end of the podcast, stretch out as long as I can.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
My mission is done. Yeah.
Everybody was hoping this podcast would go another 36 seconds, so it's you're just doing a service.
Really my fault. I apologize.
You're both terrible, and you're all fired. I'm not speaking to you for the rest of the night. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. We really appreciate it. Until next time, my name is Frank.
I'm Scott.
I'm Paul.
Good night, everyone.